Hello, friends. I am Sarah from Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting, and I'm going to talk to you today about something that feels positively terrible. What happens in positive conscious parenting when our child, whom we love, whom we adore, we have in most cases taken care of ever since they were teeny tiny babies, what happens when they are older and they start yelling at us? It gets us right in the heart, doesn't it? Well, I want you to know that children pushing back and aggressing towards their parents, verbally and or otherwise, can be a very, very normal developmental stage. Now, we may pause and wonder, doesn't my child know how much it hurts when they talk to me that way? Don't they know what they're doing to me? Well, odds are good that they actually have no idea what they're doing to you when they yell at you, when they treat you this way, because the part of the brain that understands others' perspectives, perspective taking, doesn't fully develop until the child is in their late teens to early 20s. So they literally may not have the brain circuitry that enables them to say, oh, I can imagine how much my words or my actions would be hurting my caregiver right now. So I want you to know that there are some things you can do to help nurture empathy. And by the way, I have a mini course on my website, dandelionseeds.com. That's with the hyphen, dandelion-seeds.com. If you look under courses, I do have a mini course specifically about how to nurture empathy in our children. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you some tips for in the moment. What do we do when our beloved child is yelling at us? So first of all, if you, the adult, are sometimes tempted to yell back or to get defensive or to say, stop it, whatever. If you have a big emotional reaction, or perhaps if your natural reaction is to get out of Dodge and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this, I am retreating emotionally, that all makes perfect sense. Once again, from a brain science perspective, what's happening is the aggression of the child effectively triggers our fight or flight response. Our sympathetic nervous system gets engaged, and just like many years ago when we were living in much more rustic conditions and there was an animal that was attacking or another group of people that was attacking, anytime our body perceives a threat, even if it happens to be in the form of our child, but if our nervous system perceives a threat, our evolutionary response is to either fight back or flee. It makes perfect sense. This is not something that we consciously choose to do. Our conscious decisions happen up here in our prefrontal cortex when we think about the effects of our actions and all that, which once again, this part of our brain doesn't develop until approximately age 25 or 30. So if you're wondering, why isn't my child understanding the consequences of their actions? The brain, once again, is to blame and to thank because it's not designed to be fully developed until much later in life. But when we respond from that fight or flight response, when we either want to fight back or want to get out of there, when a child is verbally or physically coming at us, that comes from a much more primitive part of our brain. It comes from the limbic system and the brain stem. We are constantly, as human beings, engaging in something called neuroception, which is essentially a constant scanning of our environment to determine whether or not we are safe. This is not something we do consciously. This happens at the unconscious level. But when our nervous system picks up any element of non-safety, it engages that fight or flight response. Here's the good news, if we don't override it. So once again, I want to remind you that if your normal response when your child comes at you verbally or otherwise is to fight or flee, makes sense. That's what your brain is designed to do. But let's come back to reality here, especially if we are the parent or the caregiver. we don't want to fight back. We don't want to yell at our child. We don't want to aggress verbally or, of course, otherwise to them, because that's not the kind of parent we want to be or the kind of caregiver we want to be. Nor is it appropriate for us to say, child, I can't handle your big emotions. I'm out of here, right? I don't want to give my child the message that I can't handle whatever it is they're bringing my way. So we can do a couple of things. First of all, there's some good news in here. We have approximately 6 seconds. It is not a long time, but we have approximately 6 seconds when we perceive a threat to proactively decide, you know what? My 5-year-old yelling at me, or my 15-year-old yelling at me, or my 2-year-old throwing a toy truck at me is not the same as an animal charging me or an oncoming semi-truck coming my way. It's not the same level of threat, and I can choose to respond differently in this moment. So this takes practice, this takes hard work, this takes some rewiring of our brain circuitry, which we do have the power to do through the gift of neuroplasticity. We can literally grow new brain circuits, new brain pathways, new neural pathways that tell our brain, when I am met with this kind of threat, fight back or get out of there. But when I'm met with this kind of threat, I don't need to have the same response. I can handle this differently. So in the differently category is how we respond to our children when they are aggressing on us. So first thing we can do is some sort of sensory calming tool. That's how we keep our prefrontal cortex online. Basically, we don't want it to turn off. We want to keep the prefrontal cortex online so we can be compassionate, so we can take perspective, so we can support our child in the way that they need us to support us, that they need us to support them in this moment. So what are some sensory calming tools you can do? Once again, I've got a whole separate mini course, once again, on my website, dandelionseeds.com with the hyphen, about staying peaceful in the moment, where I have a whole lot more ideas. But for starters, easiest thing you can do is a big exhale. I talk about this in some of my other videos, including on YouTube, if you happen to see this there, but a big exhale helps engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also known as our ability to rest and digest. And by doing an exhale that is longer than our inhale, we effectively tell our brains that there's safety here. Now, it doesn't mean, I love what's going on here. I may not want a truck flying at my cranium. I may not feel comfortable with my child, no matter their age, yelling at me. It doesn't mean that those things are okay, but it means that I don't have to have the same level of reactivity as if something bigger were going on. So by engaging the breath, we create a sense of safety in our body. We can also do tapping, just like this. These are ways to, by the way, this is all founded in science. You can research the scientific benefits of tapping. You can squeeze this point that is right between the thumb and the index finger. That is also a calming point. There are lots of things you can do right in the moment to tell your nervous system, chill out. This is going to be okay. I've got this. And then once you give yourself that sensory calming tool, you are more likely to keep this part of your brain online so you can support your child through their big feelings. Now, all of this happens, as you know, in what feels like a split second. This happens very, very quickly. So take as many deep breaths as you need to, and not just, breaths from here to here, but actual belly breaths where, once again, your exhale is longer than your inhale. Wait until you feel a sense of safety in your body. If you don't feel any sense of safety in your body, of course, you're either going to freak out back in your child's direction or you're going to want to run away. So make sure you feel that sense of safety in your body. Now, if your child is yelling at you, you've got a couple of options, especially depending on the child's age. The younger the child, the more support they are probably going to need. But you can move from a place of feeling like you're being attacked and instead take an intellectual approach to it. And you can say something to your child like, wow, you must be so upset right now. Or, I can see how angry you are. Or, I feel your sadness. I feel your anger. It makes so much sense to me. Simply by virtue of validating the child's emotional experience, you can look underneath the behavior and instead get to the root of the issue, which is always going to be something going on in here for the child. So how do you access here? You get past whatever's going on up here. You look right past the words if you're able to do that and say, wow, they must really be hurting inside to be yelling at me this way. What's going on for them? Once the child is calm again, and I'm not talking 2 minutes after this volcanic eruption, I'm talking perhaps an hour later, perhaps a couple hours later, perhaps even the next day. Once again, you'll want to have this discussion closer to the event if the child is younger, but you do want the child to be fully regulated. Then you can talk through what are some other things you can do when you're feeling really angry. I don't like being yelled at, but your anger makes perfect sense to me. So what are some other things you can do when you're feeling angry? And you can have a brainstorming session that's peaceful. You can also share, here are some things I do when I'm feeling angry. And you might come back to, oh, you know what? Sometimes I make an exhale that's longer than my inhale. It helps me breathe out my anger. Sometimes I do tapping. All of these things that I'm suggesting also work for children. Sometimes it can be mad feet. You might talk about in children's terms, instead of maybe a long exhale, maybe it's, ooh, sometimes I breathe like a fire-breathing dragon, because it accomplishes the same goal. But you can give them skills when they're not in the moment. When they're in the moment, their learning brain is off. They cannot absorb a single word that you are saying. So what you want to do is simply co-regulate with them so that the volume, the gusto comes down a notch so that you can relate to them on a more peaceful level. So another thing you can do besides validating, and I've got, again, I feel like this is not a promo for all the mini courses, but I've got a separate video specifically about holding space for big feelings, where I give you some more tips about how to be present in that moment when your child is expressing big feelings. But I'm talking about how you handle it as the adult in this specific video. So when the child is coming your way, figure out, what is it I need to feel peaceful? Because of course, nobody likes being yelled at. Now, another thing you can do, and this works particularly well if the child is a little bit older, is you can say, and by the way, especially if they're using profanity or name calling or anything like that, you can say, you know what? I need to pause this conversation. You might even come up with a hand signal ahead of time, such as timeout. In my culture, this symbol means timeout. And I'm not talking about a punitive timeout where you send the child away. I'm talking about pause the conversation for a moment. So you can say to the child, you know what? This is my code word where we need to pause for a second. I'm not feeling comfortable with the language you're using toward me. All of your feelings make sense to me, but let's pause for a minute. Let's go outside and get some fresh air together. Let's find a way where we can feel peaceful together, because I want to hear the message behind what you're saying. I want to show up for you, and I want to feel like I'm emotionally safe to do that. Will you work with me on that? And you can, in using nonviolent communication strategies, you can say, I need a boundary here, and your feelings still make sense. It's still not okay that you're calling me names or using swear words or whatever. You can set boundaries in loving ways and create some emotional space for yourself so you feel emotionally safe again, while still saying, child, I want to hear everything you're saying. It makes sense to me. Let's find a way that works for both of us. And then your best bet is, this is really hard. I'm giving you a fair warning. This is really, really hard. Stop and listen. Just listen. Don't mind the flaws in your child's argument, if there are flaws in their argument. Don't mind the inaccuracies of the data they're presenting. Don't mind any of it. Your job right now is not to correct. Your job right now is not to be right. Your job right now is not to make them feel like, oh, why did I bother telling my special big person, because they're not going to listen anyway. Your job right now is to make it safe for them emotionally to talk to you freely in ways that feel peaceful enough to you. So that might mean that you're making mental notes about, oh, I don't remember the situation that way. Or, yeah, that part over there, that's not actually what happened. But save those, put those in a mental box, if you will, so that you can revisit them peacefully later after your child feels fully heard. Because more often than not, I would say almost 100% of the time, when children feel fully heard and the feelings feel validated, it doesn't mean the facts are validated, but the feelings feel validated, whew, that diffuses all sorts of discomfort in their nervous system so that they can speak to you more peacefully, so that they don't feel they need to be so much on the offense that it puts you on the defense emotionally. Now, what about a child who is physically aggressive and perhaps, especially if it's a younger child, who is coming at you with fists swinging and legs kicking and all the movement that may or may not feel safe to your body? Absolutely have boundaries. Your job is to model how to keep your body safe. Now, depending on the child, there are different strategies that are helpful, especially if you have a child who is neurodiverse. I encourage you to work with a specialist for neurodiversity. What I'm talking about is more neurotypical children, but some of these strategies still work regardless of the child's ability level and skill level and any diagnoses they may or may not have. But you can simply remind them, ooh, hitting hurts. Gentle legs, gentle arms, gentle hands. Tell them what to do, because most of the time, by the time a child comes swinging, their rational brains rather, are so offline that they are literally in fight mode, and there is nothing verbally that is going to work. You need to calm their nervous systems first before the body can calm down. So if a child has arms that are swinging at you, for example, you might say, use those arms and give yourself a great big hug. Now squeeze, because it's virtually impossible to harm oneself with a self-hug, but it still gives them that proprioceptive input, that safety in their body of, I'm doing something with my arms. Tell them what to do with their arms. If they're kicking, okay, kicking hurts. Stomping legs, use your stomping legs instead. It's not stop, be gentle. It's not stop moving your body, because for a child who is moving their body, their need is to move their body. So find a way where they can move safely. I do not recommend, and I spoke with Dr. Ross Green about this in my expert interview with him, and you're welcome to go check that out. I do not recommend telling the child, when you're angry, go hit a pillow, go punch something, go kick that, that punching bag or whatever. That helps, I use very loosely. What that does is essentially pairs those aggressive feelings with continued hitting or continued kicking. And you don't want that pairing situation to continue. So essentially what you want the child to do is to find a safe and non-violent use of their arms or their legs. If they're a biter, give them a washcloth to bite. Give them something safe that they can put in their mouth and, snarl back and forth with like a dog if they need to, because it's that very, very primitive, I have this need to get this movement out. So what is a safe alternative they can use where they can still get the movement out and you can keep your body safe? Now, as for things like physical restraints, if the child is young enough and really having trouble, you can help by giving your child a big hug and saying, I feel your need to get this out. Let's give ourselves a big hug together. And you can help create safety in their body by doing something like that. I do not recommend, unless it is a true, legitimate safety issue for you, I do not recommend separating from the child, because then the child is left to say, now what do I do with these big feelings? What we want to do, as long as it is physically and emotionally safe for us, great big caveat there that has to be here, as long as we feel safe enough, the best way to regulate a child's big feelings even when they're yelling, even when it seems to be directed to us, is still to co-regulate with them, because our nervous systems do work on the basis of picking up each other's emotional states. So if we aggress back, if we yell back, if we fight back in any way, the child will only escalate. Instead, if we can be the calm in their storm, if we can provide emotional safety for them, their mirror neurons will effectively pick up our more peaceful state, and it will help bring them back to a place where they feel more peaceful. And when they feel more peaceful and safer, they will express those big feelings differently. The feelings don't go away. The goal is not to stop the big feelings. The goal is to help children express the big feelings fully through to completion in ways that still help us feel safe. Final point for today: after a child aggresses towards us, either verbally or otherwise, make sure you go back to some of your sensory calming strategies. It's very dysregulating. Even if we have remained calm through our child's eruption, we can still feel really off kilter for a while. So make sure you do something that feels peaceful to you. Nature is incredibly healing. It literally, 5 minutes in nature is scientifically proven to lower our blood pressure. Go outside if you possibly can. Look at a houseplant if you can't go outside. It still scientifically is proven to help decrease our anxiety, our blood pressure, our stress levels. Give yourself that proprioceptive input. Give yourself a hug. Do some more tapping. Sing. There are lots of things you can do to create peace and calm in your body so that you are not then carrying around that stressful event in your nervous system. So hope this helps. Let me know if you have questions, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon.